Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where today we are going to be going over more of the new Phyrexia storyline. Sadly, Joe said something about getting a makeover, some kind of like essential oil deal. I'm not entirely sure what he's talking about, but basically he said he'll be back by the time we get to the end of this story. But for now, we have our heroes currently entering the Fair Basilica. They are entering Elishnorn's main domain. They are going to go through the Mycosynth Gardens to the Seed Core and basically try and end this whole thing. We're getting very close to the climax of our story. So basically that's where we're at. We have Elspeth, Kaito, Koth, Malira, a few of the Mirrans, Tyvar. All these guys are kind of just walking through, trying to make sure they don't draw too much attention to themselves. Kaya is there watching Jace very carefully because Jace, of course, as we said before, has become infected. And we know that there's going to be some kind of weird stuff going on with his hand. That said, he's still the one in control of the Silex. He's prepared to sacrifice himself. He did drink Halo earlier, which is part of the reason why he's got this resistance to the oil. He's still able to make it through. But while they're going through all this, they're talking about how Nahiri sacrificed herself and how it makes them extremely sad. Because obviously what she did was super epic and she caused an entire Phyrexian arena to collapse in on itself, even though she can't destroy enchantments in her current iteration. But basically, that's what she does. She causes the whole place to collapse. They're able to get through and escape down this whole pathway. It's really awesome, but Kaito's saying he hopes that she's dead. And everybody's kind of like, well, that's a really messed up thing to say. And he goes, well, do you want to fight her? He's pointing out that she was the most powerful planeswalker on their roster. She's an old walker. She's got all this understanding of how like metals and rock work together. She can control metal. They're on a metal plane. It makes sense that she would be an important ally. But now she's a Phyrexian. And so they're kind of worried about that. At the same time, they basically ask Malira, like, hey, did you know what was happening? And she's like, yes, I could have healed her, but it would have put her out of commission for like a week or so. And they didn't have that. And so they basically are like, well, could you do that for Jace? And she's like, yes, I could, but would he let me? And Jace is kind of like, Vroska's already been turned. I need to make this sacrifice. He's very much in the headset of like, this is how it needs to be. I'm smarter than everybody. I figured it out. I need to kill myself to save everybody else. It doesn't have that. It's not like he's obviously not thinking clearly. He just lost the person he loves. But that's basically where he's at mind-wise. He's thinking, I have to go sacrifice myself because if I don't, then somebody else is going to have to do it, and they might not be able to have the resolve to actually pull that off. So they keep basically walking through the Fair Basilica. There's these giant like calcified statues. There's a lot of this ossification going on with everything. The walls are made of people that are like frozen in bone. It's really cool, really very interesting design for everything. But essentially what winds up happening is they get through all of those areas. They feel like they're going into a trap because literally no one is attacking them. And they get to the Mycosynth Gardens. And once they're there, they see Karn. Once they've gone this certain distance away, because that may recall that was where Karn had his head removed and everything. He's just kind of there, and they freak out because they see Karn. They're like, "Whoa, what? Why? Are you okay?" So some of the characters have to split up essentially. So some of them stay with Karn, like Koth and Malira. They stay with Karn to try and help him out and see what they can do. At the same time, you have Elspeth, Jace, Kaya, Kaito, and Tyvar. 5 of them. They continue deeper in. And so as they're going through, they reach the Seed Core, or at least the outside region of the Seed Core, which is really cool because it's basically like this orifice that's open, and there's just a waterfall of oil. So anybody that goes through is inherently infected just by having it touch them, which is kind of insane. So to basically get around that, Tyvar uses his whole gold metal plating of the hex gold, and he covers everybody in it, and they all go through. And in the moment they go through, as soon as they're through, he lets Kaito out. Kaito then uses his ability to basically remove it. The reason being that whenever he uses his abilities, the hex gold, essentially by covering a person in something, it makes it to where that person can no longer use their magic. It's a drawback to helping others, but it's a pretty cool little like wrinkle they added to his design and how he works as a character, where they were able to basically say, hey, I can do this really cool thing where I can transmute others, but doing so is very taxing on me and results in other people basically missing out on that particular aspect. So yeah, that's basically what we had with that moment. It was a pretty cool idea, and they get through the actual thing. They're in the seed core. They're at the end. They're about to make it. All they have to do is walk through, and they look up, and there's omen paths opening up, and Elish Norn's ships are already ready to start going through, so they're too late. They need to be able to basically do this as soon as possible. And it's at this moment that Ajani and Tybalt show up. Tybalt is Phyrexianized. He's completely gone. And so now we have Tybalt and we have Ajani, and Tyvar and Elspeth stay back to fight both of them, which is super awesome. The actual story is really cool and a great idea. We then have Kaito, Kaya, and Jace left. They're the ones going into the inner area. They're venturing in there to see how this whole thing shakes down. So Tyvar's essentially telling them, like, hey, this is actually really messed up. The entirety of my culture of Kaldheim is centered on the World Tree. And right now, looking at this abomination over the Realmbreaker, it is a perversion of what the World Tree should be like. And that basically is what it looks like. The place is essentially just a Phyrexianized World Tree. It's supposed to be impossible for it to be existing on a plane, since the World Tree's whole purpose is that it houses several planes. So it's a really weird spot for it to be in, but it's causing all of this mayhem, and it's already getting all out of hand. I have a few lines here from basically Ajani and Elspeth during their fight, which is pretty crazy, because he says, "Welcome, Elspeth, my dear. It's wonderful to see you again. I'm so glad you survived to join me." And it's funny because he talks so like nicely to her, and she says, "I'm not here to join you. I'm here to stop you." Why would you want to do that? Now we can be together forever, perfect and harmonious. No more differences, no more conflict, no more pain. You will be home. We'll have the peace we've always sought. All will be one. And then we of course have the whole deal with Tybalt. And this is awesome because remember, Tybalt, he wreaked so much havoc on Kaldheim. He caused all this mayhem. So now we get a chance to hear Tybalt and Tyvar talk to each other. And he says, he calls him a little princeling. And he says, "You're always going to end in my hand." And he's like, Tyvar's like, "What are you, like, you are, like, just listen to this." He says, "These fights were predestined as ours to win. The Scalds will sing of the stand we make today, but only if someone survives to tell our story. Go." Tyvar literally does the, "you go on ahead, I'll stay and fight" whole deal. Because like obviously he's the hero. That's like his entire shtick, is that he's a super battle hero. Like actiony, all the stuff, no shirt all the time. Which again, might want to note, not having a shirt on Phyrexia, probably a bad move, but Kot seems to be doing fine, so I could just be wrong. But again, we see more right here as they talk about how like this is basically going to be it. This is going to be the final battle between these characters, and it's such an awesome moment, the way they decided to do all these different things. And technically what I'm covering right now is part of the 5th episode, but I just wanted to kind of just explain that there's this moment. So this is technically near the 5th part of the story, and there's only 2 parts left. This is part of the 5th part, but the last part's very long, so I'm going to cover some of that here since this was so short to cover and get through all those little bits. But essentially, what we have here is a moment with Ajani and Elspeth again. He says, "You can't defeat me." He says that it's useless to try. Join us. We are the inevitable. We are the ideal. We are one, and once you come to be one with us, we'll be stronger in a way you can never have dreamt while you lived in flawed, imperfect flesh. And she's like, "Johnny, if you can hear me, I'm sorry." And he goes, "You have nothing to apologize for." And he's just so incredibly powerful. And it's worth knowing that at this point, Ajani is fully Phyrexianized. What we saw the Sleeper Agent was essentially just him being Phyrexianized in general. Here, he really is completed. They've replaced all of his body with the porcelain bony plates. His axe, of course, was driven into Karn's torso, and now the only thing that he's using now is Elish Norn's axe. The whole thing of like the symbolism of revenging his brother with the dark axe and his light axe, and the whole deal has been completely replaced with 2 Elish Norn based axe. He is completely devoted to New Phyrexia, and so now he's fighting with all his might, and he is very quickly defeating them. And he says, "Phyrexia is no one's enemy. We only want to bring you the peace and perfection of becoming one. We only wanted to bring you home. You do not need to be alive to join Phyrexia." And it's like, oh, snip. And again, we go over to what's happening with Tyvar, and he's fighting. And he's a little prince, little pretender, little would-be hero. There'll be no sagas in your name. If your legend survives this day, it'll be a tale of failure, the saga of a man chosen by a greatness he could never have been worthy of. How does it feel to be the last prince of Keltheim? And he goes, you're not even the god of lies. Even so, nothing you can say be trusted. And he says, perhaps not, but you're too dumb to understand why you should be afraid. And so what's cool is that we have this moment where you can see how Tybalt uses his tails now as a weapon. Before he was like me all the time, but now he obviously he's a Phyrexian, and you can see in the way he's designed that he is designed for attack. He's designed for aggression, less so the Loki like deal that he was doing before, where he was just kind of deceiving people. And he has a forked tail now, and each side has stingers that inject oil, and they go straight at Tyvar's body. But Tyvar, of course, has the hex plate, the hex gold, so he's basically able to just block these things as they come at him. And it's super cool to think of the way that this whole like fighting is happening. And that's essentially where I'm going to leave this one off, because all I'm going to say is that Jace is very quickly starting to turn, and he's the one in control of the Silex. Kaya and Kaito are currently down there with him in the Seed Core while this fight is happening up here. In the next episode, we'll have a chance to see kind of how all of that shakes down and how it's going to play out. It's super exciting. It's so good. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, travel well.